Hey people, Shaman Hawk here for Shamanic Lodge. I'm going to do one of these true shamanic stories today. It's about self-trust, and particularly with new shamans and shamanic apprentices, because they're getting into different forms of reality and they're not really sure if what they're seeing is correct, if they can really trust their visions, because a lot of the things that they get into are so far out of their normal perceptions of reality. And that's all reality really is, right? It's your perceptions. And one instance in particular comes up. I had an apprentice named Martina, back in the mid to late '90s, and she served the old style apprenticeship, so that's 8 years. She did 4 years with a guy, Alan, up in North Carolina, when he lived in Palm Beach, Florida, and then she finished with 4 years with me. And so there's a lot to her story, so I'll do other videos on that. So we were at this spiritual retreat in Davie, Florida that I was running, and we did different sweat lodges and we did different activities, gardening, farming, all that. And one day she had looked a little bothered, and I'm like, "Well, what's wrong with you? What's up?" And she goes, "Oh, I've been having these visions, and I just don't know what I'm supposed to do with them." I'm like what? Building this huge sweat lodge. I'm like how huge? And she's like, it could hold like over 50 people in there. That's big. That's definitely big. And excuse me, when we were doing our sweat lodges, we were using Melaleuca, and that's a really invasive species in South Florida, but it's awesome. It grows in a swamp. It's got a nice reddish white wood to it. It's that one that had lots of paper, around it, and but it's always wet. And it's just like making wicker furniture. So you can bend it after you cut it. You shave all the bark off, bend it, and the sun hits it, and it stays there, and it lasts a good while. So we had plenty of wood to do that with. And I'm like, well, we can do it anytime. She goes, I just need to think about it. I'm like, okay. So a couple of days later, she's like, I think I'm ready to do this. So we started to work on it. And how we did that, I had her stand in the middle, and I said, walk to the door, wherever you feel the door is. Close your eyes, turn around in circles, and then just walk to the door. And she figured out what that was. And it was about these 3 steps. So that was pretty big. And I'm like, okay, well, so if that's a distance you want to the door, she goes, yeah. And then so we made that the radius and then went around from there. And so we're looking at, I want to say like 12 feet, 12, 13, 14 feet in diameter. And of course, it was a little over a meter tall, so not quite 4 feet. So we're using big pieces of Melaleuca to bend this over and construct this thing. And it got to the point where, I mean, I could climb onto it. It was like monkey bars in the old gyms. And I'm like, we're going to need more blankets compared to how we normally do our other sweat lodges, which are only maybe 7 feet. You could have put one of our normal sweat lodges inside this thing easy, and if you took apart the other ones, you could probably fit 2 more in there as far as space goes. So it's definitely big. And of course, we had to find more rocks too. So that made another journey with this because we had some, but Florida, especially Southeast Florida, is not noted for like sweat lodge quality rock. You have to buy them, and they're brought in from someplace. And so I'm like, tell me more about this vision. She goes, oh yeah, it's like had like over 50 people in there, mostly women and children. Like children too, huh? Okay. Now we already had 2 other sweat lodges on that property for different purposes, but this was going to be something special. And she was talking about, she goes, but it's only really going to have one real ceremony in it, and it's going to be destroyed after that. I'm like, okay. She goes, actually, it's going to be destroyed during the process. Okay. Is everybody going to be okay? Oh, yeah, it's going to be a great sweat lodge. All right, sounds good. So, what are we doing in it? And then the other thing was, she is, well, that's the other strange thing. You and I won't be in it. Who's running it? She goes, I don't know. We don't know this person. Okay. Because that was against like one of my golden rules. If I don't know the person, that wants to do a sweat lodge there, because me running the property, I'm responsible for whatever happens on that. And it's like, nah, I hope you get another vision. No, this is it. Okay. So it took us a while, about on and off, because we had so many other things to do. About a week to build this thing, because it was finding the pieces big enough for it, shaving the bark off of them, and pre-bending them so they didn't break, and then bending them and putting them on, tying them up. So the two of us had to be available, and she lived in Fort Lauderdale. I'm way out west in the Everglades in Davie. So we worked on this a couple weekends, and she'd get more visions about it, and how some of these people were, some of these women that were going to were really, really big. And again, that was against one of my golden rules, because face it, if you're really overweight, and if you're obese or not, you have high blood pressure issues, now you're on pharmaceutical drugs, and a sweat lodge, especially a hot one, is not a safe place for you. So we're starting to break a lot of my golden rules with this vision, but I'm like, all right, well, let's just see how this goes. So we're done. We're done building it. We needed more blankets. We had 3 layers of blankets on this sweat lodge. People volunteered. They brought some rocks, nice big pieces of granite, and we just couldn't get it hot in there. It just would not get hot for some reason. And we had these rocks that was like the size of footballs, volleyballs in there. It took a lot, but plus getting them in the lodge, I had an extra long pitchfork with an extra long handle that I made, sliding them along, and it was an effort, a real effort, and it was barely getting warm in there. And this is even in the summer in Southeast Florida. And she was so upset with herself. She was like, I just can't believe I did this wrong, blah, blah. I'm like, well, I'm there with you. You told me that yeah, I brought you into it. And I'm like, you can't do that. You do the pictures. That's the rules, okay? You get the visions, you do the pictures, and who knows what purpose this has. If it has any at all, or you just had it and we did this. It's beautiful. We can live in it sometime. I mean, trying to make some fun out of it. Still not happy. So she and I and some other people in our tight circle had 2 sweat lodges in there. Nobody was sweating, like I said, so she was just feeling bad. So we let it sit there. People would come by and look at it and all that. So a couple weeks later, I get a phone call from the girls at the New Age bookstore up in, I think it was Pompano, Florida, Pompano, Fort Lauderdale area. And they go, hey, we want to have a sweat lodge just for women, and like little girls and maybe some boys too. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we can do that. She goes, yeah, but I know you have these rules that you and the owner of the property worked out, but can we change some of those? And I'm like, probably not. What are they? Well, we have already a lot of people signed up. We might have to do a few sweat lodges in the day. Like, what do you mean? She said, well, we got like about 50 people signed up already. Really? Okay. And she goes, yeah, but we do have this woman that's going to be running it. She's from out west. She used to live on the reservation, blah, blah. Apparently that's some new age thing. If you used to live on a reservation, you're now qualified to do all kinds of stuff. If you had an Indian boyfriend, you're like shaman by injection or something. But anyway, so I'm like, who is it? Josie Ravenwing, Yeah, okay. Now the internet back in 90, I think it was 97, 98, wasn't that hot then. So I Googled, not really Googled, but looked up online and saw a little bit about it, and like, okay, so white girl with fancy hairdo and, nice page. Sure, why not? Told Martina, hey, guess what? The girl at New Age Bookstore got about 50 people signed up for this woman to come in and do a sweat lodge. And she goes, really? And you're going to let this happen? Hey, you said we're not going to be in it. Let's see how it goes. And so I called the bookstore back up, said, yeah. And so Martina now is ecstatic. They're like, wow, it's actually going to happen, I said, yeah, but when I called the bookstore back, I said, get people to bring blankets. Well, we have blankets, yeah. And I told them the story about how this sweat lodge came to be. There's one I said, I know we can fit 50 people in this thing, and we got the rocks. We just need more blankets. And they're like, wow, okay. And here's the thing with this: when you go to these new age bookstores and stuff like that, a lot of times these people that work there, there's a lot of make believe stuff. So when a lot of these people see these things really happening, these really visions happening, the premonitions that really lead up to something else, the synchronicities that are a long chain of events that happen up that are just way beyond normal life. Sometimes these people get really surprised. I'm like, well, I mean, you're into this manifestation thing, you're into your shamanic life and your witchcraft, because they're all witches up there, right? And boom, here it is. Now what? Now it's like, that's impossible, really? So they none of them wanted to come down and actually look at it either. They just want to like show up that day, which is really strange. So anyway, this woman Josie Ravenwing comes in, and it's the other thing about that. I mean, just drops in. The phone's ringing off the hook, and I answer the phone. This is like when it was hanging on the wall, right? And this girl is like, yeah, can somebody pick me up at Fort Lauderdale Airport? I'm like, not now. I'm like, what gate? Where are you at? What airline? Maybe I can get somebody to come down there, because it was like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours away. So in case you're just putting this out there, when you have people visiting, get all your logistics in order. Call the bookstore back. You got to go get this girl. See ya. So we were trying to figure this all out on this weekend, because this woman's got to show up in the morning and have a sweat lodge that afternoon. No time to talk to the people, no time to do anything like that. And again, one of my golden rules, I like to talk to everybody that's going to be in the lodge. I talk to them for a little bit one on one. And, but that wasn't going to happen with this one. So she showed up, she's walking around the property, we're trying to talk. And I'm like, you don't have people here? They didn't give you firewood, nothing, nothing, And Martina had told me that too. She goes, we're going to have to do everything for this, and we won't be inside. So normally I'd be like pissed at this. And I'm like, no, okay. And Martina was just like, well, I told you. Yeah, you did. You sure did. Here, let's do this. Let's make the pictures come true. And so we did. So we had to do everything for this woman and this lodge. And so we got the rocks in there, we got the blankets on already. And man, it was interesting the way the people think the physics of this is, when I tell them some of these strange things, they think that's just impossible. Like, there's physics, Hawk. Yeah, but these big pieces of granite, man, they got so red hot. I mean, it was just unbelievable. These things were just like glowing in the daytime, and I don't normally do sweat lodges in the daytime, and it was amazing. And putting them in there, finally get the last rocks in there. It was hot in that lodge, and so we made sure everybody had their water and all that, and hydrating before they go in. That's how I like to do things. But again, and I talked to this woman, Josie Ravenwing, about like medical stuff. Look at some of these women. Some of these women are about 150 pounds overweight. I know they're on prescription drugs. Oh, have to trust in spirit. Not if you make a 911 call. And Martina was just like, we got to trust in this. I'm like, okay. And my logic was saying this is a bad idea, but here I myself have to do the same thing. My gut was going, it's okay. My gut was just saying, okay, the logic is bad on all of this. The picture is bad on it. But my gut was like, okay. And Martina was the same way. No, I feel good with it. And she was usually more worrisome than I was about things. She was Miss the paranoid shaman, right? And so these women got in there, and I was explaining to them, like, it's wood frame, so you can't really pull on it, and so on. And so Martina and I just got out. We're outside, just waiting to see if anything happening. If they need anything, since we're on servant mode. And the lodge, they were in there for about an hour, And I mean, this thing was hot. Now and then they'd open the door, and everybody came out. But while they were coming out, I'd hear crack, crack, and I'd hear laughter. I'd hear people scream a little bit like, whoa. And of course, some of these big girls were in there trying to pull themselves up and just cracking and breaking this stuff because when this Melaleuca dries, remember, it grows in a swamp. So when it's dry and then it starts to get really brittle. So it doesn't last too long. Not like willow, not like other, like a maple saplings or something like that. And it was just cracking and crunching. I could see the blanket starting to fall in a little bit. And then Martina was just like looking at it, just smiling as she's watching the blankets and everything kind of cave in. And these people are coming out. And I'm like, all right, people, because I'd strung up some ropes. And I'm like, we got to take the blankets off and hang them over the ropes so they can dry so they don't get moldy. And so you guys that brought blankets can take them home. Because down in that South Florida sun, blankets will dry real quick. So they did that. And as we're looking at it, and the top was caved in, it was broken, it was just beyond repair, and people were looking at it like, sorry? I'm like, yeah, well, I told you not to be climbing on it, so. And Martina was just smiling like a possum, man. She was just so happy looking at this because it was all coming true. And so this Josie Ravenwing was showing the people the sacred abalone, the sacred eagle feather, all this sacred stuff, that she'd smudged people with and did all this other stuff as she was collecting money for the sweat lodge. And then all of a sudden she's gone, you know, take the money and run kind of a thing. And but then Martina found her sacred objects, under the roof line the next day, after the rain. And that was interesting too. We had such a peaceful, heavy, heavy rain. Not like a normal South Florida thunderstorm, where things are like almost tornado level. And it was just cleaned the area so well. And but then the next day we took the sweat lodge apart, and she took pictures of it too. It's so funny. She took one picture of it when it was built, but she took a bunch of pictures of it when it was destroyed. And she goes, "This is the part." She goes, "It's just so weird that not only did it happen, but I'm happy this part happened." And I'm like, "Why?" She goes, "Because it allowed me to release it." And that's a really important lesson too. When we do these things, we do the visions, we do the pictures, but it's important for us to be able to let it go. That is its purpose. Maybe we don't know what the whole purpose is or exactly how these things are going to play out, but you just do your part of it. You're like the person in a movie company making the stage, making the sets and props. You really don't know what the play is about. You got a kind of an idea from what you're building, but everybody talked about what a great sweat lodge it was, and how great they felt. A lot of the people that were heavy made commitments to themselves to go ahead and get some exercise, get off the antidepressant medicine, blood pressure medicine, all these other pharmaceutical drugs or other, made a commitment to get off. So I was happy to hear that. But there's something else I wanted to say, and my old mind is forgetting it. Oh, and when I mentioned to the crowd, when I was getting feedback, I told them the story of how the lodge came to be. And it was, again, interesting that the people that were in the lodge, the everyday people, a lot of them never been to a sweat lodge before, were just amazed at like how this goes. It's just like, wow, it just flowed together so well. But the spiritual leaders, per se, were just so dismissive of it. Not that I needed any validation for the story or Martina did either, but it's just like, as long as I've been doing this, I still love the moments of when it all falls together so beautifully. Those synchronicities. You know, does that mean that there's a purpose? Does that mean that there's some divine order? I don't know. I have no proof of that, you know, or me being the skeptical shaman, right? But at the same time, when it does flow, it does make, at least it makes me wonder, you know, what was that wave? You know, is that what we trust in? Is that what our or our subconscious part of us just knows that this is going to be great, even though the rest of the logic and everything says no? Mm. I could think of other projects, you know, I do those for workshops, but again, we've been into this 20 minutes. The point of this is for you new shamans and you apprentices, when you get the visions and you find yourself doing things, you don't know why, you're trying to do the right thing. It's because you care. You want to you have good personal bearing. You want to give the best effort, have the best results for people, and so you want to do it absolutely right. Sometimes what you think is right doesn't work right there at that time. And that's where you have to be open to different standards, open to different procedures, open to different things, you know, because you can learn how to change your method of operation, you know, change yourself and your core, you know, from some of these experiences. But it is, you know, and even to this day, as long as I've been doing it, I still find myself doing my checklist of like, does this really make sense? Am I really supposed to be doing this? And this is looking sketchy, sketchy hawk, you know. So, but I still keep doing it. All right, people, if you like all this stuff, like and subscribe, you know, that routine, and share it. And if you know anybody going through some awakenings, there's a lot of people right now going through their shamanic or spiritual awakening and not really sure what they can trust in the visions and so on. But, you know, I don't even like to say have some faith, but do the pictures. Do the big pictures to the best of your abilities and release it. All right, the meaning can come later. The meaning cannot come at all, you know, because sometimes the effort that you put in there supplies this pulse of consciousness and other types of energies that go out through the collective. And sometimes just doing the pictures is enough. Catch you guys later.